Hi, my name is Stephanie, and this is This Reader's Life, Books and Other Blessings. I'm glad that you're here. If it's your first time ever visiting this channel, mostly I talk about books, but I often talk about the little blessings that I note along the way, and sometimes they have to do with books or booktube, and sometimes they're just something that, I don't know, something that happens at the grocery store, just when I'm out and about. So that's what this is about. And right now it is the end of June. We're getting close to the end of July. We're about 3 weeks in, and I thought I would do an update I am doing for the month of July. There's several different events that go on, but I chose Jane Austen July. And part of the reason that I chose it is because I've not read all of Jane Austen. And the other reason is that I've not always been totally in love with Jane Austen. I read Pride and Prejudice and I thought it was fine. But I'm not a huge fan of, up to now, I haven't been a huge fan. If you can't change your mind, you can't change anything. And my husband told me that once, and I thought this is such a true statement, because we do change our minds from time to time. And sometimes it's in a good way and sometimes not so much. But right now with Jane Austen, it's a good thing. So I will tell you where I am. I'm trying to do the 7 challenges that the wonderful booktubers who sort of sponsor or host Jane Austen July, and I will mention them all below, but their names are Kaite, Claudia, and Marissa. And again, I will put all of their booktube channels down below. They go at this in such a wonderful way, and I'm sure they know so much more than I know that it's almost intimidating when you're not a Jane Austen fan to read her books and then comment on them and say what you think. But that's what's going to happen today. So there are 7 challenges, and I'm working on, what have I done? I've completed 1, 2, 3 of the challenges, and then there are a couple more that I have plans for, or that I've started to work on. But I'll start by saying I had hoped to read, I may have already said this, I had hoped to read all 7 of, all of Jane Austen's novels, all 6 of her novels. And in the past, I've read Pride and Prejudice, and I read Persuasion. And for this time, I decided to read, I thought I'd just start at the beginning, and in 1811 is when she published her first novel, which is Sense and Sensibility, and it the byline on that was by a lady. And what I did not know when I started reading this, and I'm finding out, not reading it, but reading about Jane, is that she was never published under her name. Later, in some of her later novels, her older brother sort of revealed who she was, but she was never published under her name. In some cases, she was published by the author of Pride and Prejudice, or by the author of another book. So Sense and Sensibility. There are the 2 sisters. This is a story. It is a love story. It's also a story about relationship between lots of people, but mostly between Eleanor, who is the older sister, and Marianne, who is the younger sister to Eleanor. And then there's a younger sister, younger than Marianne, whose name is Margaret, but she's a small player within this book. She's not part of the main characters. Both Eleanor and Marianne, who are close as sisters, they both are in love with 2 different men, and these men's circumstances prevent them from marrying either of the sisters. So Eleanor is in love with Edward, who they have moved away from where she and Edward were originally visiting with one another, and it was what felt to Eleanor like the beginning of a courtship, and she found that she liked Edward very much. She felt also that he liked her a great deal, and when they moved away, there was never really any promise from Edward, and over time she comes to believe that he's not going to write to her. They're not going to see each other. He does come to visit her, and he doesn't commit himself to her in any way, and goes away again. As a matter of fact, it's she's rather uncomfortable about it, and she's a little brokenhearted. Mary Eleanor doesn't talk about her problems a lot. She's pragmatic. She doesn't want to distress her family. She tries to remain unemotional, although she has a lot going on the inside. Marianne, on the other hand, she is in love with a man who she met right after they moved into this little cottage, which is where they ended up going after their circumstances at their estate were reduced when their father died. So they are living in this small cottage in Devonshire, and Mary Ann has fallen in love rather quickly and flamboyantly and recklessly with a man named John Willoughby, who is also sort of flamboyant and reckless, and it just looks like a whirlwind courtship that's going to go very quickly, and then out of nowhere, John Willoughby is gone. And Marianne doesn't know what has happened, and she's weeping and she's crying, and she's just reacting out loud in a lot of ways. She is not one to she wears her heart on her sleeve. She doesn't make any bones about the fact that she is desperately unhappy and cannot figure out how he possibly could have deserted her, that he had in her mind made some promises to her, and after a while she finds out that John Willoughby is engaged to someone else and plans to marry, as well as Eleanor finds out in a very difficult way, that that Edward, the man that she feels so strongly that she loves, is also engaged. It's a secret engagement, and so that's what she's understood, and she's very broken. But again, she keeps everything she holds everything inside. So she doesn't give any emotional. There's the sense she gives no emotional responses. She is she's very cool and collected on the surface. Marianne, on the other hand, she neglects her health to the point where she is almost going to die because she is so brokenhearted. So she is dying of a broken heart, while Eleanor is the stalwart stoic. She doesn't. Nobody knows what she's going through. So to me, that was mostly what the book was about. It was, of course, there were lots of other things going on, and Jane Austen, she sort of just keeps your brain busy with all the different things that people are saying and the way things are starting to fit together, and a letter here and a sighting there and something that someone says in passing. All of those things start coming together, and it turns in, you wouldn't call it a mystery, but it's like it's almost a comedy of errors is what I think of, is that everybody thinks they know what's going on, and nobody really does. And I love the way she brings it all together gradually. I love the way that the characters grow a bit. Eleanor realizes some of her mistakes in being so pragmatic and not leaning on anyone else. And Marianne realizes that how she sees herself as maybe thoughtless and not a very good sister to Eleanor. And it certainly brings the two of them closer together. And I don't know about most of Jane Austen's books, but for the most part, my experience has been, if you're looking for a romance, we're looking at some happy endings. Even if it's not the happy ending you might have expected early on. There was a character in this book named Colonel Brandon who I absolutely adored, and he was an older gentleman who was he was fairly reserved, and he was a very manly man, I thought. And I would have, if I were Jane Austen, I might have written it a little differently, but I thought this was a great book, and to say you would change what Jane Austen did is really a bad idea. But again, I'm not her biggest fan, not yet, but I'm really enjoying, I plan to read some more of her books, and also that in starting to read a little bit about Jane Austen and watch some things about Jane Austen, she and her own sister had such a close relationship. And that's one of the things I admire the most about her, and I think is such a neat thing to know, that those kind of relationships are timeless. So I'll say that about about number one. The number one challenge, which was Sense and Sensibility, is the novel that I read that is one of her novels. Number two is to read something that is not one of her novels, and there's a few things you can do. There's some things that she wrote as they call it the juvenilia, and there are some selected letters. I've read some of the selected letters, and I enjoy them. I think maybe more than I enjoy her novels. They're so honest, and she's so forthright, and she's just maybe just a little bit snarky now and then, and I kind of like that about her. She was way ahead of her time in a lot of ways, but I think that Regency period, women were figuring out how to better themselves and how to not be so not quite so dependent as and then I think they kind of got squashed again for the Victorian age. But the Regency age is when you sort of started seeing that coming out, and they stood up for themselves a little bit better, and it just seems that way to me. I would have to do so much more studying on it. But number two is something that is not one of her novels. I am in the process of reading Love and Friendship, which is one of her early little short novels that she wrote as a juvenile, and it's epistolary, and I just started it. So far I like it. I like the letters. I have not finished the entire book of some of her selected letters, but I'm enjoying it a lot. I love the traveling. I love that she cares so much about fashion. I think that's fun, and she does that without being prissy. And I love that someone from that era where you think of them fainting on couches, which she talks about all the time in her stories, but it's very tongue-in-cheek. When you talk about fainting on couches, that was not Jane Austen. She had a very, she was very steady. And that's number three, something that is nonfiction about Jane Austen. And I'm reading Claire Tomalin's Jane Austen, A Life. And so far I like it. I'm not far enough into it to say very much, but I will say something from that time period that so surprised me, and I had never heard of. I did not know this, that young children, when they were born, they stayed with their mother for a short time, and then they were sent off to live with another family until they were a little older, and until they were up and walking and probably weaned. And so that in some cases it was wet nurses, in some cases it was dry nurses, and it was usually somebody in a nearby town. And I'm not sure I quite understand it. And I think it's horrible to think of, and it talks about it in Claire Tomalin's book, taking a child that is 2 years old or older away from the family that they've come to know. Anyway, I am reading Claire Tomalin's Jane Austen, A Life, and I am enjoying it. And so that will satisfy something nonfiction about Jane Austen for number three. For number four, it says a retelling or a work of historical fiction set in her time. And I've never read many Regency novels. I'm not interested in reading a retelling of one of her stories. Not a big romance reader, and most Regency novels are going to be romances. Most Regency romances, what I think of. There used to be a whole Harlequin line of Regency romances, and I think I read a few when I was younger. But that time period wasn't real interesting to me. When I was younger, I loved all the things that were about the prairie and more post-Civil War and United States of America type stuff. That's what I was reading when I was a kid. And then when I read historical novels, by the time I got to that point in my reading, I wasn't reading a lot of romances. So Regency romance is sort of what I feel like I should read since I'm reading Jane Austen, but I want to read some of Georgette Heyer because she is or I think it's Georgette Heyer or Heyer. She wrote a lot of Regency romances, a lot. To me, she's kind of the queen of Regency romance for people in this time. And so but I haven't decided which one, and to be real honest, they're pretty long. So I'm kind of scouting around for one that's not too long, and I did start one and I had to put it down. So we'll see if I make it through a work of historical fiction that is set in Jane Austen's time by a more of a contemporary author now. And then it says something by, number 5 is something by a contemporary of Jane. And I have chosen Anne Radcliffe's The Romance of the Forest, and it's a Gothic novel, and it's not the one that Jane mentions in, she mentions a couple of Anne Radcliffe's novels in Northanger, but I haven't read Northanger, but I'm interested. I've always liked Gothic mystery, so I am going to read one of Anne Radcliffe's books. I know that she was a contemporary of Jane Austen and that Jane Austen liked her writing. She also sort of made fun of it when she was making fun of Gothic in general, but I'm curious to kind of dive into that. And then number 6, which I have completed, is watch a direct adaptation. And I actually have watched 2. One was Persuasion, which I watched and I enjoyed it, but I watched it right behind the book and I could see where it was going, and so I didn't enjoy it as much as I had enjoyed the book. Now, Sense and Sensibility, to me, I watched the creme de la creme of Sense and Sensibility adaptations, and maybe I'm wrong, but to me it's the 1995 version with Emma Thompson, who wrote it, directed by Ang Lee. Kate Winslet's in it, Hugh Grant, and Alan Rickman, who played Colonel Brandon, and I absolutely adored this movie. I thought it was wonderful. Hugh Grant was, did I say that already? Hugh Grant was in it, and I thought it was so well done. I thought it stayed true enough to the book that I wasn't frustrated, and I thought I thought that Kate Winslet was absolutely wonderful. She was very young when she was in it, I think 19. And Emma Thompson was wonderful. So much of what I've seen of Emma Thompson was when she was a little bit older, and she was so delightful. And again, she wrote the screenplay, I believe, or the script for the movie. But I really, really liked watching Sense and Sensibility. And again, I followed the book with the adaptation pretty quickly, but that one, it was more riveting to me, so I enjoyed it more. And then number 7 is watch something related to Austen, but not a direct adaptation. And I watched Lucy Worsley's Behind Closed Doors. And number 1, I love Lucy. I didn't know I loved her, but I love Lucy Worsley now, so that was a discovery. And Behind Closed Doors, it was really enjoyable, and it gave me a much better picture of what that time would have been like, the time in Bath when they were there, which they traveled back and forth to from time to time. It's interesting that Jane Austen's family was pretty much an middle class to upper middle class family, and that they were so normal. They weren't dukes and duchesses. They weren't. They obviously weren't well to do, but they were right in that middle, and I think that was it probably started to divide at some point into more lower class and upper class, or maybe it was just coming out of that. I don't know. The period is interesting to me, Regency. So I want to look more into that and learn more of that. But my Jane Austen July, I've really enjoyed. It's hot outside right now. It's July in Kansas, which is it's like another word for hell. It is really hot here, and humid. We've had lots of rain. My tomatoes are just starting to get ripe. I'll be making salsa and doing some canning before too long. And then, as I said before, just a quick life update. There have been my husband's had some health issues. We have lots of appointments that we have to follow up on. Those are the things that are sort of going on for me in July, and it was so nice to stop in the air conditioning for a while in the afternoon and watch. As I said, I watched both Persuasion and then the documentary by Lucy Worsley and Sense and Sensibility with Emma Thompson. Emma Thompson is a really good actress, and I think she's very intelligent. But at any rate, that's it right now for Jane Austen. I will sort of update. I read a couple of other books that are not Jane Austen related for my book group, and then one other. And I will also talk about those in my next video. It'll be an end of July wrap up. I've got a tag that I should hopefully come out on Tuesday, and Until then, y'all remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, be kind to the planet, and be blessed. Have a good day. Bye-bye.